You can't hurt me. There's no stopping me now.
Welcome to Fearless Female Safety with Lisa, where we bring safety empowerment to you. I'm Lisa, and I'll be your host today and your safety mentor as we continue to focus on important safety topics with helpful tips to help repair and protect you, your family, and friends from becoming another statistic. Today, we will focus on the very important topic of domestic violence. Domestic violence is also called intimate partner violence and can be defined as a pattern of behavior in any relationship that is used to gain or maintain power and control over an intimate partner. Abuse is physical, sexual, emotional, economic, or psychological actions or threats of actions that influence another person. This includes any behaviors that frighten, intimidate, terrorize, manipulate, hurt, humiliate, blame, injure, or wound someone. Domestic abuse can also happen to anyone of any age, sexual orientation, religion, or gender. It can occur within a range of relationships, including couples who are married, living together, or dating. Domestic violence affects people of all socioeconomic backgrounds and education levels, age, race, gender, sexual orientation, faith, or class. Now, today, I'm excited to have with me an expert on this topic in our studio, who is also a dear childhood school friend, and her name is Lori Powell. Lori is very experienced and an expert in this topic with extensive credentials ranging from a certified life coach, event interventionalist, certified family recovery coach, youth and adult mental health certified coach, and a master's in sociology. Lori is kind enough to be here today and will not only share her expertise, but also her personal story. Thank you for being here with us today, Lori, and sharing your own experience. Lori, why is this topic important to you?
Lisa, thank you so much for having me today. This is a very important topic to me because I am a survivor of intimate partner violence. What happened to me when I was 20 years ago when I was in college. Today I am 57 years old, and I think back how blessed I am to really be alive. Some of the things that happened to me were very dangerous, including being stalked with a gun. And when you asked me to talk about this topic, I thought it was very important because many of us don't know where to go or we're very fearful to get help.
I mean, it's really scary when you talk about this topic, and I think it's underreported. I think the prevalence is very high, and I think hearing from you, who is a survivor and a victim, is very, very important. I think the listeners will really appreciate that. So, Laura, I think just maybe we can get started just for maybe people who are involved and don't know too much about it. Can you share a little bit about what are the different types of domestic violence?
Well, first and foremost, domestic violence is often referred as domestic violence. We hear that term, but it is also known as intimate partner violence, and it can happen to anyone. Now, we typically hear women are by far the most frequent victims, and men are typically the most frequent abusers. That could be a thing of the past as we move forward and people are coming forward. So I don't want to just place it on that type of domestic violence, that it's only in that type of environment. But the U.S. Department of Justice estimates that 90% of the assaults on partners or spouses is committed by men against women. Now keep in mind, anyone can be a victim of this. It can be a child, it can be a relative, it can be somebody that you're dating, it can be a family member. The most important thing to remember is when we talk about domestic violence, it is when another human being is trying to exert control and power over another victim. And that can be mentally, it can be physically, it can be sexually, it can be economically. I mean, there's various ways that they can exert that power over you and create a fear to move forward.
Lori, I know you had shared with me, just because I know you, like a little bit about when you talk about physical, how did it start for you? What were like the first signs that you noticed in, this your own personal situation?
Yes, gosh, I wish I could go back in time, and I do remember the very first time it happened because that would have been the moment I would have walked away. And that's why I'm really glad we're having this discussion. The first moment for me was when the gentleman that I was dating, who was about 6'2", 200 some pounds, and I'm 5 foot, about 105 pounds. So you could see the disparity in size. He pinched me. He took the back of my arm and twisted me so hard. And it was because a guy had talked to me. And from that moment, it escalated. And it was starting with a pinch, and then it went to a slap and a pulling of the hair. And it was always met with afterwards, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it, or I'm sorry, I was drinking.
So, I mean, you trusted this person.
I did.
And even though these are little initial things that happened, you forgave him.
I did, and the other thing that sounds very unusual to hear was it was almost like I felt like he really loved me. It was a jealousy that he had, but at the time I didn't realize it was a bad thing. Jealousy is not a good thing. That was where he began to exert that power and control over me. I thought, wow, he loves me. He doesn't, want anybody to hurt me or look at me, and that wasn't it at all. He didn't want me to be out of his sight.
So it definitely was showing those signs of controlling you. There. So I bet you this happens to a lot of girls and they don't even realize that it's happening, that they are all actually starting in this process of becoming a victim.
Absolutely. And I can't even impress upon you enough how young it starts. It starts in high school too. These young ladies dating these young guys, and they are excited to have a boyfriend. And that's how I was in college. I didn't have a serious boyfriend in high school. So when it happened in college, you are noticed and you feel pretty and you feel somebody's interested in you, and you don't know any better sometimes. You think this is how a relationship is.
Unfortunately, not a positive one, right? Even though it may seem at the time. Lori, in your particular situation, was there anything verbal? I know he had the pinches. It did progressively get worse. From what you deal with you work with a lot of people in your coaching. What are some of the verbal things to look for?
Yes, that absolutely did happen to me too. Telling me I wasn't smart, or the way I dressed, I looked like I was cheap, and my weight, and no one's going to love you, and I'm the only one that's going to care about you. Those are often words that are said to really push you down a hole, and you start to believe it, and you think, yeah, I'm really, especially if you never had a boyfriend before, or a girlfriend, or a significant other. If this is your first time in a relationship, you're thinking, maybe that's why I never had one in the first place. Maybe this person's going to be the only one that really loves me. And so you start to question your validity. And you start looking in the mirror and you're like, you're right. If it wasn't for him, I would be alone.
And clearly you can't see Lori, but I can. Not only is she extremely intelligent, but she is very beautiful. So it's happening to everybody out there. So no one really is safe, right?
No, you're not safe. And part of the problem, too, is if you grew up in a family that you would witness this absolutely looks normal to you. You think this is a relationship. My parents survived it. I am just going to stay the course. I'm not going to leave.
So this can be like a situation of familiarity. You've seen it. Right, you were raised in that culture. Do certain people of social cultures or economic status, is this something you find more prevalent in one versus the other, or is it just pretty equal across the board?
In my opinion, it's equal across the board. Now, in some cultures, women and or men they have a place and they know what their place is, and you don't question it and you don't step out of line. And in other cultures, you get a little bit more courageous. You feel, I'm an individual, I can make my own choices, have a job, you name it. But even when you can have those choices, someone can take them away so easily. And one of the types of domestic violence is economic. And that one is a scary one, because when somebody is your sole provider, your house, your shelter, your bills, you're not going anywhere because you don't have money. You can't even save it. They count every penny. And that is why a lot of people stay. They don't know how to get out because they financially are dependent on someone. And they make it that way. You're staying home. You're not going to have a job. Here's your allowance for the week, and that's it.
You're basically stuck.
You're a prisoner.
You're a prisoner. Boy, that's a scary term, isn't it?
It's the truth.
Is that how you felt, Lori, in your situation too? With even in a relationship, maybe a prisoner of a relationship?
I did, because when it happened to me on campus, now keep in mind, I'm almost 57. This happened when I was 20. There was not the help that there is today. But even still, I was alone, and people looked at this guy, and he was in a fraternity, and nobody wanted to help me because they were afraid of him. They were afraid of what he would do, and especially the day he came looking for me with a gun. I wasn't where I was supposed to be, and he was searching for me. And at that time, his fraternity brothers actually hid me on top of their fraternity house roof as he searched the house. And we could just hear him walking through there screaming my name. And he was walking around with a gun looking for me. And I remember being on that ledge shaking and crying. And the fraternity brother put his hand on my mouth and said, please, please be quiet, because if he sticks his head out this window, he will see us and we have nowhere to run and he may shoot both of us. And that's a horrible feeling, being 20 years old. And I should have been studying and working on my projects. And here I am thinking, will I make it off this ledge?
Wow, my hair on my arm, I was literally standing up when you said that, because you never shared that part of the story with me. So it's very, very frightening, and people knew. So in your situation, try to protect you. But do you think there's other situations where the person is polished to the exterior to everybody else and people don't even know what's happening? Do you see those cases also?
Absolutely. And they have certain positions in the community that nobody would ever expect them to behave that way. So you feel, I can't talk about this because nobody's going to believe me. And they're in the community and they're held to a high standard. And someone will say that I came forward and I'll be alone. And the price I pay going home will be far worse. And that's what it was like with me as well. You learned to be almost like a doll that was taken off of a shelf, and you're taken with this human being, and you don't dare do anything wrong, because when you go home, it'll be so bad for you. Like, I remember laying on the floor and being kicked in the fetal position, my head, my stomach, everything. And there was nobody that would come to my aid.
Well, Lori,
Yeah.
that's really scary. And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there experiencing this. I mean, do you ever think back? It was different times back then, and resources were different. Is there anything you could think now for the listeners that are experiencing it today? What can they maybe do to try to protect themselves or do something differently?
Well, one thing in particular is learn how to defend yourself. Take a self-defense class, whatever that may be. Learn to be confident in your choices and take off the fact that you want to be in a relationship and you want to be in love. Love should not hurt mentally, physically, emotionally, none of that. It started with a pinch, a little pinch, and you might just say, oh, it was just a pinch. Just a pinch for me turned into being stalked with a gun. Someone lays hands on you, you need to turn around and walk away. Anybody that will love you and honor you and protect you will never lay hands on you. They just won't. And you can't help them. I mean, whatever that is that's going on with them. I learned, later on that this gentleman had, some serious mental health issues, some anger management. You cannot cure them. You've got to save yourself, because you may not make it out alive, and many, many, many don't.
And it's not your problem, meaning it's their problem. Maybe the victims sometimes think it's something they're doing wrong, but it's not. Correct?
It's absolutely correct. If someone doesn't like how you dress, then that you're in the wrong relationship. You need to be with somebody who can. But find somebody that can help you, a close friend. Learn the numbers that you can call. Have your items packed and ready to go in case you do have to flee. Know where to go. There is no time when you are being assaulted. You don't have time to grab your keys and your license and your money, like emergency money. Have some of those items maybe at somebody else's house as an emergency backup. Your most important thing is to get yourself, and if you have children, out of that environment immediately before something bad, and I'm talking death, happens, because you call 911 as much as they're going to try to get to you, it may not be quick enough.
So it sounds like you're saying have a plan. Mm-hmm. If you find yourself in this situation, be prepared, have a plan. Might not happen overnight, but have that plan to try to get out and seek help.
Seek help. And keep in mind, when you're seeking help, if you go to someone and they say to you, well, that's how your dad was, or that's how so-and-so was, and we survived it, that does not minimize what you're going through. Keep going until you find someone that will listen to you and help support you to get out, because your safety is the most important thing. And it escalates. You've seen it on television where these individuals will come to your employment, to your work, and they will not stop until you are in their control or no longer existing on this earth.
Oh, very scary. Lord, can you share some of the signs, whether you're the victim or if you're seeing other family members or other people? What are some of the signs of domestic violence?
Well, if you're a family member, I would say you're looking at someone, there could be bruising. You may or may not see it. How they are around that individual when they're around, they're more introverted, they cower, they look to them to respond for them. If they're visiting with you, if it's a boyfriend, this is a great example. If it's a boyfriend or girlfriend or significant other that, you're not with them, you're not living with them, but they're continually calling, they're showing up unannounced, they want to know where you're at, they're asking your family members where they are, and they're getting upset when they don't know where you are. You're noticing a change in how an individual maybe dresses or presents himself. It's completely different than who they are. I would say that those are some of the signs, for sure.
I'm sure there's a lot of signs. I think sometimes people overlook the signs. Thank you for sharing those signs. What are your particular signs you think for you? Were there anything particular for you with the signs other than I know he initially started with the pinching?
That's the sad part. I never saw the signs. That's why I'm so happy you asked me to do this. And I don't know if it's because I didn't see them. I just didn't realize what this was. And the sorrow in his eyes and his face, and I'm going to get help. I'll never do it again. And he drank too. Drinking was a big issue for him. Alcohol was a problem. So it became worse when he was under the influence. And he would always say, I'm sorry, I'll do better. I'll get help. I'll stop drinking. And I always thought he would. And then there would be a short period of time and he'd go right back. And I felt, I have to be forgiving. This is who I am. I have to be forgiving. But I never thought about myself. Not once did I think about myself. I thought about him and how I made him feel. And I made him feel inferior, or I made him feel whatever he said I did. Never once thought, well, what about how you're making me feel? I lost myself. And it took me a long time when I left college to be able to feel comfortable again in my own skin. It was a very long time.
Wow, Lori, thank you for sharing that. Do you find in your daily practice dealing with a lot of clients or patients, we could call them, do you find that this happens to, what is your normal, I hate to say the word victim, because we always want to say survivor, but do you find that certain girls or boys are in a certain stereotype that you work with, you deal with daily?
I think when it comes to domestic violence, I just think it's someone that has that feeling of wanting to belong or wanting to be in a relationship at all costs. It could happen at any time. You could have this relationship and there were never signs before, and all of a sudden things change in your life where, for example, a job, somebody loses their job, and all of a sudden this part of this individual comes creeping out and it becomes anger and violence, and it's directed at you. You start becoming the punching bag. And maybe it was always there, and all of a sudden something just pressed that button and let it loose.
Like a stress, a factor, maybe something could it have stemmed from their childhood too,
Yes.
from the abusers? Can you share maybe just a little bit on what you've seen from what someone who is the actual abuser, if I'm using the right word, maybe I'm not?
I think with anything in life, you grow up a certain way and you think that that's your normal. I grew up, and I love my dad, God rest his soul. This is definitely nothing to disrespect him, but he did drink and he never got help. So when I went into college, that was my normal. Like, I just thought that's what everybody did. And then when I met this gentleman, he did the same thing. So I didn't really think anything of it. But the one thing that was different between him and my father, the guy that I dated, was physically violent. So I got myself trapped by not understanding what should a dynamic be like in a relationship, in a family home. I'm not saying, drinking is bad. I work in the substance use disorder mental health field. I'm saying some people cannot drink. It does not bode well with them. Others can, and they can go on with their lives. Others, it just doesn't. And what happens in that environment could be detrimental, not only to the person that's drinking, but to those around them.
You use the word trap, that kind of like triggered in my brain. Wow, being trapped, or like the prisoner that you mentioned. So for people that, again, are finding themselves in the situation, or may think they're in the situation, or they know they're in the situation and they're trapped, what are some resources, not only like for someone who's doing the abuse or for someone who is going through it, what are some of the things that they could do or resources that they could seek? I think that's really important so they don't feel that they are also trapped or a prisoner.
Well, I think the most important thing to recognize first is that it is not your fault. So you have to take that out of the equation, and that might not be easy, because if you get beat down so far, whether it's physically or emotionally, you start to believe these things that are being said to you. But I would suggest everybody, in this day and age, we did not have cell phones like we do now, like when I was in college. I would say one number you would definitely be able to put in your phone would be the safety number to call, the National Domestic Violence Hotline, and that is 800-799-7233, also known as 800-799, the word SAFE. If not, you can also text 88788, which I think is probably more along the lines today with everybody carrying a cell phone. I would have probably chosen that. But in my life, early on, we didn't carry phones with us, wasn't what it was. And nobody knew where to go to on campus, friend-wise, even family-wise. Nobody understood. And getting a protection from abuse, although that is a piece of paper that is legal, that does not necessarily protect you. So I don't want people to think they have a false sense of security by filing that. You still have to be on your toes. Watch yourself. Sometimes it may take you moving out of an area to get away from this individual. And I know that's hard, but if they're unwilling to leave, sometimes for your own safety, you have to get away from being easily accessible to them.
So pretty much letting as many people as you trust in your life know what is happening. I'm sure there's been situations where they threaten to harm you if you're going to tell other people.
Oh,
so
absolutely.
That's pretty scary. I mean, you've got these numbers. Lori shared a really important number again, the 1-800-799-SAFE, SAFE. Very important. Something else that I like that Lori said is no one deserves to be abused. And the abuse is not your fault. You are not alone. There are a lot of resources out there. And what about if you are the abuser? Could they call that same line, Lori? Is there help for someone who does abuse?
Yes, there is. And I would definitely reach out to that number to get the resources. That's one number that can get you the help that you need for yourself and or the person that's being victimized. The one thing I would also suggest too is have a code word with your family or friend. That way, when you say that word, they know that you're in duress, you need help right away, call 911, get someone out there, that you are unable to leave your situation. And you may not have access to a car, and they might just have you cornered. So have a plan and be prepared to implement it immediately.
Lori, I mean, we can go on forever about this topic, and I would love to bring you back and really dive more into it. But, I mean, the key things are be prepared, have a plan. You're not alone. Tell people, right? You're not alone in the situation. Let others know. Seek help. And Lori, thank you so very much. We really, really appreciate it. We're going to wrap up our safety topic for today on domestic violence. And if you want to learn more, Lori's website is, this is all one word, lifecoachloripaul.com. So lifecoachloripaul.com. Thank you, Lori, for being here today. And always a big thank you to our dedicated listeners for tuning into this Fearless Female Safety segment with me, Lisa, your host and safety mentor. And special thanks to Valentina for the music to our segment, There's No Stopping Me Now. If you found this information to be helpful, please share it with your family or friends. I look forward to connecting with you again on our next Fearless Female Safety live stream segment as we continue to bring safety empowerment to you. For more safety information, my website is www.fearlessfemale.net. Today and past safety segments are archived and can be found on wxedfm.com under Archived Shows, in the Mary Ann Shaner folder, then under the topics of Fearless. Have a blessed day, be fearless, be empowered, and always be safe. Till next time.